Today we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The first one in particular is unique, as it's an underground rave party that turns into a serious caving nightmare. As for the second one, it's full of chaos, since disaster follows one after the other for each individual. As always, viewer discretion is advised. It was July 10th, 2005. The sun blazed over the arid landscape of San Luis Potosí as five friends loaded the last of their supplies into the bed of Javier's pickup truck. Miguel, the self-proclaimed leader of their expedition, tossed in a cooler packed with beer and tequila. Carlos, Alejandro, Emilio, and Daniel followed suit with their camping gear, none of which included proper caving equipment. None of them had bothered to research the terrain they were heading into. The trip had been hastily planned after Miguel had seen photos of the underground raves held near Cueva de los Caballos on social media. The group had never been caving before. What they knew about proper caving procedures could have fit on a bottle cap. They had no helmets, no proper lighting equipment beyond their phone flashlights, no emergency supplies, and no understanding of the karst topography that characterized the region. What they did bring was alcohol, cases of it, along with a portable speaker and recreational substances that would further impair their judgment. They arrived at the makeshift campsite in the late afternoon. Other vehicles were already parked haphazardly across the clearing, their owners having arrived earlier for the underground rave that was to take place that night. The friends set up their campsite. They cracked open beers before their tents were even fully secured. Meteorological forecasts had predicted heavy rain, but none of them had checked the weather report before departing. They made their way toward the cave entrance, following the sound of music without a trail map or guide. The path was already muddy from light rain earlier in the day, but they paid it no mind, slipping occasionally and laughing it off. They had each consumed several beers at this point, and Daniel had already twisted his ankle after tripping over an exposed root, though he dismissed it as nothing serious with a wave of his hand and another swig from his bottle. The rave was in full swing when they arrived. Hundreds of young people danced in and around the mouth of Cueva de los Caballos. For hours, the five friends danced, drank, and partied with reckless abandon. They ventured deeper into the cave than the organizers had intended, ignoring the few "do not enter" signs that had been half-heartedly posted. As midnight approached, the sky opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, quickly turning the ground outside the cave slippery. The rave continued, but Miguel, now heavily intoxicated, decided he wanted to retrieve more alcohol from their campsite. Despite evident concern from the others about the weather, his compromised state, and the darkness, he insisted on going alone. Alejandro, only slightly less intoxicated, ultimately decided to accompany him, grabbing a sack to carry back more beer. The two young men stumbled out into the rain. Neither had thought to bring a flashlight or headlamp. Their phone batteries had died hours ago from taking videos and photos of the rave. The only illumination came from the occasional flash of lightning, which cast brief, ghostly shadows across the landscape before plunging them back into absolute darkness. Miguel walked ahead, carrying the empty sack that would soon be filled with bottles. His intoxication had given him false confidence, a dangerous bravado that made him blind to the peril surrounding them. Alejandro followed a few paces behind, his movements increasingly uncoordinated as he struggled against the mud pulling at his shoes. A sudden gust of wind brought with it a heavier sheet of rain. Miguel quickened his pace, but then somehow, he strayed from the path in his impaired state. The ground ahead seemed solid as he took a glimpse during a lightning flash, and he stepped forward confidently. However, he was gravely mistaken. The sound of breaking glass pierced the night as Miguel's foot found not solid ground, but empty air. The sack containing several beer bottles shattered against the rock wall as his body plummeted into the darkness of Sotano de Xoconostle. His scream was brief, cut short by impact after impact as he hit each level of the deadly pit. First the 79 feet, 24-meter initial drop, then tumbling down a steep 20 feet, 6-meter slope. The slope's end was followed by another drop of 62 feet, 19 meters. He had a hard fall and his body struck the ground with an immense force. Alejandro froze in terror. The sound of glass breaking and Miguel's abrupt cry had sobered him instantly. He called out, but no response came. Terrified and disoriented, he stumbled backward, now acutely aware of the invisible dangers surrounding him. Through some miracle of self-preservation, Alejandro managed to retrace his steps to the cave entrance. He explained to everyone what had happened. Everyone scattered in confusion. Carlos, Emilio, and Daniel, upon hearing of Miguel's fall, rushed out into the rain, despite their intoxication, desperate to find their friend. The local authorities were contacted by one of the few sober attendees who had cell service. Rescue teams specialized in cave exploration rushed to the site. They arrived at dawn, by which time the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The 4 remaining friends, now painfully sober, led the rescue team to the approximate location of Miguel's disappearance. The cave rescuers, professionals with proper equipment and training, methodically searched the area. They quickly identified the entrance to Sotano de Xoconostle, a geological feature well known to them, but entirely unknown to the group of friends who had treated this dangerous terrain as a playground. The rescuers rigged safety lines and descended down with proper lighting, safety gear, and communication equipment, all the precautions that Miguel and his friends had neglected. At the bottom of the pit, amid shards of broken glass that had once been beer bottles, they found Miguel's body. The fall had been unsurvivable. His head had suffered catastrophic trauma from the multiple impacts. The medical examiner would later determine that death had been instantaneous after the first major impact, a small mercy in an otherwise senseless tragedy. News of the death spread quickly through the community of cave explorers. For them, the story was a familiar one, another preventable fatality caused by a lethal combination of ignorance, impairment, and disrespect for the unforgiving nature of underground environments. The local authorities closed access to the cave system pending an investigation, though everyone involved knew that the cause was clear. Miguel had died not because the cave was inherently deadly, but because he and his friends had approached it with a deadly lack of respect and preparation. The 4 surviving friends faced the consequences of their poor decisions. They had sought fun with alcohol instead of knowledge and proper equipment. They had ignored basic safety rules taught to every beginner. Never explore alone, always bring proper lights, know the terrain, and never drink or use drugs while caving. As rescue workers carried Miguel's body out, the survivors realized how foolish they had been. The beer at their campsite, the speakers, their casual attitude, all seemed meaningless now. Their weekend trip had ended with a death that could have been prevented. In the weeks that followed, signs would be posted around Cueva de los Caballos and Sotano de Xoconostle, warning visitors of the dangers. The underground raves would be banned, at least officially. But for those who understood the unforgiving nature of caves, no sign could adequately convey the simple truth that had cost Miguel his life. That the earth beneath our feet contains wonders worthy of exploration, but only by those who approach them with the knowledge, equipment, and sobriety that such dangerous beauty demands. This next story is quite chaotic, and you can't imagine how all 3 cavers went through their own ordeals in one single adventure. The morning of August 20th, 2015, began like any other for 3 18-year-old friends in Montana. They gathered around, excitedly mapping their adventure to Ophir Cave. Their hearts raced with anticipation, completely unaware that their poor planning would soon lead them into 24 hours of escalating terror. The 3 teenagers, 2 males and 1 female, had underestimated the cave's dangers. They had no helmets to protect their skulls from the rock ceilings. Each carried only a single light source, with no backups for emergencies. Their clothing was inadequate for the cave's bone-chilling cold, where the temperature was around 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Most alarmingly, their plan to navigate the cave's vertical drops revealed their deadly ignorance. Instead of proper climbing equipment, they brought 1.5-pound folding kayak anchors, simple boat anchors, to use as hooks. Their safety rope was cotton core utility line from Walmart, with a working load of only 200 pounds, barely enough to support a single person's weight, let alone withstand the forces of a fall. Before leaving for his morning work shift, one of the young men told his coworker that if he didn't show up for work the next day, it would be because he was stuck in a cave. This comment, though said as a joke, would later prove important. By late afternoon, they entered Ophir Cave at 6 p.m. The temperature dropped around them as they went deeper, their flashlights showing only small areas of the vast darkness. Millions of tons of rock now stood between them and the world above. An hour into their journey, they confronted their first obstacle, a vertical drop of 30 feet, 9.14 meters. Here, they put their flawed plan into action. One of them wedged a boat anchor, a device never designed for human safety, into a crack in the rock. They tied many knots along their weak rope to create what was supposed to be handholds. The female waited anxiously at the edge while the two males began their descent, dangling over the depths, supported only by their grip strength and a weak rope. The cotton fibers stretched alarmingly with each movement. One slip, one failure of the improvised anchor, and they would fall onto the unforgiving rock below. Reaching the bottom of the first drop, they immediately faced an even more terrifying challenge, a second drop of 60 feet, 18.28 meters. Their flashlights weren't strong enough to light up the bottom. Nevertheless, they repeated their unsafe method, tossing the boat anchor until it caught on something and began climbing down into the deep darkness. Halfway down the second drop, something went wrong for the first time. Maybe it was a warning sign. One teen's foot slipped on the rope, sending rocks cascading down onto his friend below. The sharp stones struck his companion's shoulder and arm, causing cuts and severe pain. The injured teen screamed in pain, but then reassured his companions that he can still make it through. After several hours exploring the lower chambers, physical exhaustion and falling body temperatures forced them to attempt their return to the surface. The cave's relentless cold had numbed their fingers and drained their strength. Their breath made small clouds in front of their fading flashlights as they realized a horrifying reality. Neither had the strength to climb back up. Attempt after failed attempt left them increasingly exhausted. Their muscles, weakened by cold and fatigue, couldn't manage the climb. The overhand knots that had barely assisted their descent now became impossible obstacles. Each failed try brought them closer to complete exhaustion. They called out for help to their friend above. She had no other option but to get rescue. However, things were about to get troublesome. The female member of their group faced her own terrifying nightmare. Without guidance and with her single light source growing dim, she became hopelessly lost in the upper passages. What should have been a simple 15-minute journey to the exit transformed into an endless maze of identical rock formations and branching passages. Each wrong turn led deeper into disorientation. As hours passed, panic tightened its grip. As her light beam got weaker, she had no extra batteries, no backup light source either. The absolute darkness of the cave, a darkness so complete it can cause hallucinations, threatened to swallow her completely. By midnight, the trapped teens faced the terrifying prospect of spending the night in the cave. The temperature felt increasingly unbearable as their bodies lost heat to the cold stone floor. Even their light sources began to fail, leaving them in periods of complete blackness that triggered deep fears. The injured teen's pain worsened as the cold caused his muscles to stiffen around his wounds. In a desperate bid for warmth, they made a decision that revealed their growing panic. They cut their rope, which was their only potential escape route, into 6-inch pieces and burned them. The short-lived flames gave little warmth while destroying their last chance of self-rescue. To make matters worse, the smoke started burning their lungs and making breathing difficult. The air quality becoming poorer added to their growing list of problems. Morning arrived in the world above, but in the depths of Ophir Cave, the teens remained trapped, one lost and disoriented, while the other two stuck with no escape. The nightmare continued, and they were on the verge of giving up. They had no contact with the outside world, and their only hope was that if somebody notices them gone missing. Same day, when one of the males failed to show up for work, his concerned coworker remembered the joke about being stuck in a cave. The coworker drove to the teen's house, finding it empty, then continued to Ophir Cave, where he discovered their truck still parked nearby. With growing worry, the coworker entered the cave mouth. Just inside, he found the female, still wandering disoriented after 12 hours of failed attempts to find the exit. Her face was marked with exhaustion and fear as she explained that her friends remained trapped below. The emergency call went out immediately. First responders Duncan Adams and Kathy Wigand of Lewis and Clark Search and Rescue entered the cave, carrying professional equipment, which was far superior to what the teens had brought with them. From the top of the first drop, they called down into the depths and heard weak responses. The trapped teens' voices were hoarse from shouting and weakened by hunger, dehydration, and exposure to the cold. More rescuers arrived with proper equipment, rigging safety ropes and harnesses. One rescuer rappelled down to the stranded teens, finding them huddled together for warmth, surrounded by the burned pieces of their rope. Their faces were pale, their lips blue from cold. The discovery of their destroyed rope shocked even the experienced rescuers. It represented how completely panic had overwhelmed rational thinking. The rescue team established elaborate haul systems, complex mechanical arrangements of ropes and pulleys to safely extract the stranded teens. Each teenager was secured in a rescue harness, then painstakingly raised up the vertical shafts that had trapped them for 24 terrifying hours. Even with professional equipment, the extraction was challenging and potentially dangerous. After 4 intensive hours of rescue operations, the teens finally emerged from the cave entrance, squinting painfully in the daylight they had feared they might never see again. Medical personnel immediately wrapped them in thermal blankets to address their hypothermia. Their bodies shook uncontrollably, partly from cold, partly from the trauma of their ordeal. Medical evaluation revealed they had narrowly escaped more serious consequences. Another night in the cave could have resulted in severe hypothermia, possibly even death. The injured teens' wounds, though painful, had been partially preserved by the cold. All 3 showed signs of dehydration, exhaustion, and the psychological impacts of their prolonged exposure to darkness and fear. After medical clearance, the teenagers were released. Later, the teens admitted they had used this same unsafe climbing system once before in the cave. Their earlier success had made them overconfident. The rescue team hoped that the fear of their 24-hour ordeal, the slow suffering from cold, darkness, hunger, and fear, would teach them a powerful lesson about respecting the dangers of caves and the absolute need for proper equipment and training.